The woman who wasn't meant to stop. Elena Cross had survived 6 years as a ghost. No ties, no trust, no tomorrow. She'd learned that kindness was a trap, and stopping meant dying. So when the diner owner in Ridgefield, Wyoming threw her into the dust for the crime of existing, she should have kept walking. She had 37 cents and blisters that bled through her worn boots. But then a barefoot child with tangled brown hair slipped a small hand into hers and asked, "Do you want to meet my daddy?" That question, so innocent, so impossible, changed everything. Because Elena Cross made a choice she'd sworn never to make again. She stopped running. If you're watching from anywhere in this world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far Elena's story travels. And if her journey moves you, hit that like button and stay until the end. Because some stories don't just entertain, they remind us that redemption is always possible, even when the whole world says it isn't. The Wyoming sun beat down like a punishment, turning the dirt road into waves of shimmering heat. Elena Cross walked with her head down, shoulders curved inward, making herself small, a habit carved into her body by 6 years of being unwanted. Her dress, once blue, had faded to the color of old bruises. Dust clung to the fabric, to her skin, to the tangled dark hair she kept tied back with a fraying piece of string. She'd been walking since dawn. The blisters on her feet had broken open hours ago, leaving dark stains inside her boots, the only pair she owned, held together with hope and stubbornness. Her stomach had stopped growling 2 days back, gone quiet in that dangerous way that meant her body was eating itself from the inside. Ridgefield wasn't much. A collection of weathered buildings squatting in the shadow of the Medicine Bow Range, population maybe 300 if you counted the dogs. But it had a diner, and the diner had a help wanted sign in the window, sun-bleached and curling at the edges. Elena pushed through the door. The bell chimed, bright and cheerful, a sound that didn't belong to her anymore. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of bacon grease and coffee. A handful of men sat at the counter, ranch hands by the look of them, their hats pushed back, their faces weathered. They glanced up when she entered, their conversation dying mid-sentence. She felt their eyes catalog her, the dirt on her dress, the desperate thinness of her frame, the way she held herself like something broken trying to pass for whole. The woman behind the counter was broad-shouldered, her gray hair pulled into a severe bun. Her expression shifted from neutral to cold in the space of a heartbeat. "We're not hiring," she said flatly. Elena's throat tightened. "The sign came down yesterday." The woman's voice was iron. "Nothing here for you." One of the men at the counter snorted. Another muttered something Elena couldn't quite hear, but the tone was enough. Laughter rippled through the group, cruel and casual. "Please." Elena hated the word, even as it left her mouth. "I can wash dishes, clean, anything." "I said no." The woman moved toward her, and Elena saw it then, the recognition, not of Elena herself, but of what she represented. Someone used to being moved along, someone without the leverage to fight back. "You need to leave." "I just need out." The woman grabbed Elena's arm, fingers digging hard enough to bruise, and hauled her toward the door. Elena stumbled, her exhausted body offering no resistance, and then she was outside again, the door slamming shut behind her. She hit the ground hard, palms scraping against sun-baked dirt. Pain shot through her wrists. For a moment she just stayed there, kneeling in the dust, breathing through the shame that had become as familiar as her own heartbeat. 6 years. 6 years of this. She pushed herself up slowly, brushing dirt from her dress with shaking hands. The street was empty except for a dog sleeping in the shade of the general store and a wagon parked outside the saloon. No one had witnessed her humiliation, which was the only mercy she'd get today. Elena turned to walk, always walking, always moving, because stopping meant trouble and staying meant worse. When she felt it, a hand, small, warm, impossibly gentle, slipping into hers. She looked down. The girl couldn't have been more than 7. She had brown hair that fell in wild tangles past her shoulders, a face dusted with freckles, and eyes the color of summer sky, guileless, curious, entirely unafraid. She wore a simple cotton dress, faded but clean, and her feet were bare, toes dusty from the street. You're bleeding, the girl said matter-of-factly, looking at Elena's scraped palms. Elena pulled her hand back instinctively, tucking both hands behind her back. I'm fine. The girl tilted her head, considering this obvious lie with the unnerving wisdom of children who've learned to read the truth beneath words. You don't look fine. You look hungry. Elena's stomach chose that moment to betray her with a low growl. The girl's eyes widened slightly. I knew it! She reached out again, undeterred by Elena's retreat. Do you want to meet my daddy? He's real nice. And Miss Sarah, she's our housekeeper, she makes biscuits every morning. The good kind, with honey butter. Every instinct Elena had spent 6 years honing screamed at her to refuse. Strange children offering kindness were how traps got set. People didn't help for free. There was always a price, always a catch, always someone ready to take what little you had left. But the girl was looking at her with such unguarded openness, such pure belief in the possibility of goodness, that Elena felt something crack inside her chest, something she'd thought had calcified beyond repair. I don't think... Please? The girl's fingers wrapped around Elena's hand again, holding on with surprising strength. I'm Lucy. Lucy Hale. What's your name? Elena should have lied. She'd gotten good at it, cycling through false names like other people changed clothes, but something in those clear blue eyes made the truth slip out before she could stop it. Elena. Lucy's whole face lit up like she'd been given a gift. That's real pretty. Come on, Elena. Our ranch isn't far, just past the creek. Lucy, I can't just... But Lucy was already pulling her forward, moving with the absolute certainty of a child who'd never learned that the world might refuse her. And Elena who had survived by trusting no one, who had promised herself she'd never be vulnerable again, who knew better than to follow a stranger's child down a dusty Wyoming road, let herself be led. The rational part of her brain cataloged all the ways this could go wrong. The father would take one look at her and see what everyone else saw. Trouble, poverty, someone not worth the risk. He'd send her away, probably less gently than the diner woman. Or worse, he'd recognize the name Elena Cross, remember the trial 6 years back, the conviction that had destroyed her life for a crime she didn't commit. But Lucy kept talking as they walked, a steady stream of words that required no response, and Elena found herself listening despite herself. Daddy says I shouldn't talk to strangers, but you don't feel like a stranger. You feel like someone who needs a friend. I'm good at knowing things like that. Miss Sarah says I got my mama's intuition, whatever that means. My mama died when I was real little. I don't remember her much, except she smelled like lavender, and she sang to me at night. Daddy doesn't sing anymore. He gets real quiet sometimes, especially at night when he thinks I'm sleeping. But I hear him walking around downstairs, and I know he's thinking about her. The girl's honesty was startling, painful in its innocence. Elena wanted to tell her to guard those feelings, to learn that the world didn't care about dead mothers or lonely fathers or little girls with too much heart. But the words wouldn't come. They walked for 20 minutes, leaving Ridgefield behind. The road turned to packed earth, then to 2 wheel ruts cutting through scrub grass and sage. The air smelled clean out here, away from the town, pine from the distant mountains, dust, and something green that might have been hope if Elena still believed in such things. The ranch appeared gradually, emerging from the landscape like it had grown there. A 2-story house, painted white once, but weathered now to the color of old bone. A barn, solid and square, built from timber that had darkened with age and weather. Corrals holding a dozen horses, their coats gleaming in the afternoon sun. Fields stretching toward the tree line, neat rows suggesting someone who cared about order, about doing things right. It was modest but maintained, the kind of place built by someone who understood that survival meant constant work, that prosperity was measured in seasons, not days. That's home, Lucy said, pride evident in her voice. She pointed toward the barn. Daddy's probably working. He's always working. Come on. They crossed the yard, passing a vegetable garden where tomatoes hung heavy on their vines and herbs grew in careful rows. A chicken coop sat behind the house, and Elena could hear the soft murmuring of hens settling for the evening. The barn doors stood open, and as they approached, Elena heard the rhythmic sound of someone working, hammer striking metal, steady and sure. Lucy dropped Elena's hand and ran ahead. Daddy! Daddy! I brought someone! The hammering stopped. Elena's feet slowed, every survival instinct screaming at her to run. This was the moment. This was where she'd see the familiar sequence. Suspicion, recognition, rejection. She'd been through it enough times to know the choreography by heart. A man emerged from the barn, and Elena's breath caught. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that needed cutting, and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile. He wore work clothes, canvas pants, a shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marked with old scars. His hands were work-roughened, capable, the hands of someone who built things and fixed things and didn't quit when the work got hard. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Dark brown, almost black, and filled with a weariness that she recognized in her own reflection. Eyes that had seen loss, carried it, learned to function around it without ever truly healing. He looked at Lucy first, his expression softening slightly. Then his gaze shifted to Elena, and she watched the softness drain away, replaced by caution. Lucy. His voice was deep, measured. Who's this? This is Elena. She fell in town and she's hungry and her hands are bleeding, and I told her Miss Sarah makes the best biscuits, and she could come home with me. Can she stay for supper, please? The man, Jacob Hale, Elena assumed, studied her with an intensity that made her want to disappear. She saw him take in the worn dress, the battered boots, the thinness that spoke of too many missed meals. His jaw tightened. Lucy, go inside and wash up. But Daddy, now please. The girl's face fell, but she obeyed, casting one worried glance back at Elena before trudging toward the house. The silence that followed was heavy. Jacob Hale crossed his arms, and Elena recognized the posture, protective, defensive, a wall going up. I don't know what Lucy told you, he said quietly, but we're not in the habit of taking in strangers. She didn't tell me anything. Elena's voice came out rougher than she intended. I didn't ask to come here. My daughter has a big heart and no sense of danger. His voice sharpened, which means I have to have enough for both of us. Elena nodded, already turning away. I understand. I'll go. Wait. She stopped, not turning around, not letting him see the defeat in her face. She heard him exhale, a long breath that carried something like resignation. Lucy doesn't bring people home. Ever. The fact that she brought you... He paused, and when he spoke again his voice had gentled slightly. You can stay for supper. One meal. Then you move on. Clear? Elena turned slowly. I don't need charity. Didn't say you did, but my daughter asked, and I don't say no to her unless I have good reason. His eyes narrowed slightly. You running from something? The question was direct, dangerous. Elena could lie. She'd gotten good at it, but something in his steady gaze made her choose a different truth. From everything, she said quietly. For 6 years now. She watched him process this, saw the calculation in his eyes. He was deciding whether she was worth the risk, whether whatever drove her was dangerous to him and his daughter. Finally, he nodded once. One meal. Then you're gone by morning. Understood. And Elena? He waited until she met his eyes. Lucy's been through enough. Whatever trouble you're carrying, you keep it away from her. We clear? Yes. He held her gaze a moment longer, then turned back toward the barn. Sarah'll have supper ready in an hour. House is through that door. Clean yourself up first. He disappeared into the barn, and Elena stood alone in the yard, dust settling around her boots, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the ground. She should leave, should walk away right now, before anyone got attached, before Lucy's hope became disappointment, before Jacob Hale looked at her with that specific brand of disgust she'd learned to expect. But her feet carried her toward the house instead, toward the promise of one meal, one night of not sleeping on the ground, one evening of pretending she was the kind of person who deserved kindness. Just one night, she told herself. Then she'd be gone, like she'd promised. She had no way of knowing that one night would become two, would become a week, would become the beginning of everything she'd lost the ability to imagine. The house was larger inside than it appeared from outside, rooms opening into each other with a kind of organic flow. The furniture was simple but well made, a worn sofa, chairs with faded cushions, a rocking chair by the fireplace that looked like it had been sat in 10,000 times. Everything was clean but lived in, carrying the patina of daily use. Lucy appeared from the kitchen, her face lighting up when she saw Elena. "You stayed! I knew you would! Come on, I'll show you where to wash up." She led Elena down a hallway to a small washroom. A basin sat on a wooden stand, fresh water in a pitcher beside it. Clean towels hung on a hook, and a bar of soap, plain, practical, sat in a dish. "Miss Sarah left these out," Lucy said. "She says a person can't think straight on an empty stomach with dirty hands. I'll tell her you're here." Before Elena could respond, the girl had darted away again, her bare feet pattering against the wooden floor. Elena closed the door and stood for a moment, staring at her reflection in the small mirror above the basin. The woman looking back was a stranger, gaunt, hollow-eyed, with dirt streaked across her cheek and hair coming loose from its tie. She looked like what she was, someone who'd spent 6 years learning that the world was a place that ground people down and spit them out. She poured water into the basin and scrubbed her hands, watching the water turn brown with dirt and pink with blood from her scraped palms. The soap smelled like lye and something herbal, rosemary maybe, clean and sharp and honest. When she'd washed her face and hands, retied her hair, and brushed as much dust from her dress as possible, she still looked like someone who didn't belong here. But at least she looked like she'd tried. The kitchen was warm and bright, windows open to catch the evening breeze. A woman stood at the stove, older than Jacob by perhaps 20 years, with gray hair twisted into a practical bun and the kind of sturdy frame that spoke of a lifetime of physical work. She turned when Elena entered, dark eyes assessing without judgment. "You must be Elena. I'm Sarah." Her voice was gentle but firm, the tone of someone used to managing households and people with equal competence. "Lucy tells me you've had a rough day." "That's one way to put it." Sarah's mouth twitched in something that might have been sympathy. "Well, supper's almost ready. You can help by setting the table if you're able. Plates are in that cabinet, silverware in the drawer." Elena moved to help, grateful for something to do with her hands, some way to earn her place even temporarily. She set 4 places at the wooden table. Plates, forks, knives, cups. Simple patterns, no matching set, the accumulated dishware of a household that prioritized function over appearance. Lucy appeared again, now wearing different clothes, her wild hair slightly less tangled. "Can Elena sit next to me, Miss Sarah?" "That's up to your father." As if summoned, Jacob appeared in the doorway, his hands freshly washed, his hair damp. He'd changed into a clean shirt, and without the dust of the barn, Elena could see him more clearly. The strong line of his jaw, the parentheses of weariness around his mouth, the way he moved with careful control, like a man who'd learned to contain whatever he felt. His eyes found Elena immediately, that same cautious assessment. Then he nodded toward the table. "Lucy, you sit there. Elena can take that seat." They sat. Sarah brought food to the table, roasted chicken, potatoes, green beans from the garden, fresh bread that steamed when she sliced it. More food than Elena had seen in months, and the smell alone made her dizzy. Jacob said nothing, just began serving, putting food on Lucy's plate first, then gesturing for Sarah and Elena to help themselves. No prayer, no ceremony, just quiet practicality. Elena took small portions, too aware of her shrunken stomach to risk more. But even that felt like luxury. Lucy chattered through the meal, talking about the new foal in the barn, about the arithmetic lesson Miss Sarah had given her that morning, about the hawk she'd seen circling over the creek. She directed most of her comments to Elena, including her in the conversation with such natural ease that it was hard to remember they'd met only hours before. Jacob ate steadily, saying little, but Elena noticed the way he watched his daughter, the quiet affection in his eyes, the slight smile that touched his mouth when Lucy said something particularly enthusiastic. He loved her fiercely, that much was clear, loved her with the protective intensity of someone who'd already lost too much. Sarah asked gentle questions, where Elena had traveled from, how long she'd been on the road. Elena answered vaguely, offering just enough truth to avoid obvious lies, skirting around the real story the way she'd learned to do. When the meal ended and the plates were cleared, Lucy yawned, fighting to keep her eyes open. "Bedtime, little one," Sarah said, her voice warm. "Say good night." Lucy hugged Sarah, then turned to her father. Jacob pulled her into his arms, holding her close for a moment, his hand gentle on her tangled hair. "Sleep well, sweetheart." Then Lucy turned to Elena, and before Elena could react, the girl had thrown her arms around her waist, hugging her with startling strength. "I'm glad you stayed," Lucy whispered, "even if it's just tonight." Elena's throat closed. She managed to pat Lucy's back awkwardly, unused to touch, unused to affection that asked nothing in return. Sarah led the girl away, and then it was just Elena and Jacob, silence settling over the kitchen like dust. He stood, began clearing the remaining dishes. Elena moved to help, but he shook his head. "You've done enough." "I should go." Elena moved toward the door. "Thank you for— Where exactly are you planning to go?" His voice was quiet but direct. "Back to town? They made it pretty clear you're not welcome." Elena stopped, her back to him. "I'll manage." "I'm sure you will. You seem like someone who's gotten good at managing." She heard him set down a plate, heard him move closer. "But Lucy's going to ask about you in the morning, and I'd rather not have to tell my daughter that I sent someone back out into the night with nowhere to go." Elena turned slowly. "You said one meal." "I did." He met her eyes, and something in his expression had shifted, not quite trust, but perhaps a willingness to consider it. "I'm revising that. You can sleep in the spare room tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest." "I don't need— Sarah could use help around here," he continued, talking over her protest. "Garden needs weeding, chickens need tending. There's always more work than hands to do it. You can stay a few days, work for your keep, and when you're ready to move on, you'll at least do it with a full stomach and some money in your pocket." Elena stared at him, searching for the catch, the angle, the price she'd have to pay. But his face revealed nothing except weariness and something that might have been reluctant compassion. "Why?" she finally asked. "Because my daughter asked me to help you, and because—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Because 6 years is a long time to run from everything. Maybe you've earned a few days of standing still." The words hit harder than any accusation. Elena felt something break loose inside her chest, some calcified piece of armor she'd built up cracking just enough to let in light. "A few days," she heard herself say. "Then I leave." "Fair enough." He nodded toward the hallway. "Second door on the right. There's blankets in the chest at the foot of the bed. Morning comes early around here. We start chores at dawn." "I'll be ready." He studied her for a moment longer, then nodded and turned back to the dishes. Elena walked down the hallway, each step feeling surreal, impossible. The room he'd indicated was small but clean, a narrow bed with a quilt, a dresser, a window that looked out toward the darkening mountains. More than she'd had in 6 years, more than she'd let herself hope for. She sat on the edge of the bed, and only then did she let herself shake, let the reality of the day wash over her. She'd been thrown into the dirt. She'd been found by a child with too much trust. She'd been offered kindness by a man with every reason to refuse it, and for reasons she couldn't name, she'd accepted. Through the wall, she heard Lucy's voice, soft and sleepy, saying something Elena couldn't make out. Then Sarah's gentle response. Then silence. Elena lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling, and for the first time in 6 years she let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it might feel like to stop running, to stay. The thought terrified her more than any of the dangers she'd faced on the road. But she was here now, for better or worse, and tomorrow would come whether she was ready or not. Outside, the Wyoming night settled over the ranch, stars emerging one by one in the vast darkness, countless and indifferent, and bright enough to find your way by, if you knew which direction you wanted to go. Elena closed her eyes, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, she slept without dreaming of escape. Dawn came cold and blue, spilling through the window like water. Elena woke to the sound of a rooster crowing and the distant lowing of cattle, sounds she hadn't heard since childhood, before everything had gone wrong. For a disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. Then memory returned with the weight of the quilt against her body, the smell of pine and dust, the impossible fact that she'd slept through an entire night without waking. She sat up slowly, her body stiff from months of sleeping on hard ground. The room looked different in morning light, simpler, more real. Through the window, she could see Jacob already outside, walking toward the barn with that steady, purposeful gait of a man whose day had started hours ago. Elena dressed quickly in the same worn clothes, ran her fingers through her tangled hair, and made her way to the kitchen. Sarah was already there, flour dusting her hands as she kneaded dough on a wooden board. "Morning," Sarah said without looking up. "Coffee's on the stove. Pour yourself a cup and then start on those eggs. There's a basket by the door that needs collecting." No questions about whether Elena planned to stay. No interrogation about her past. Just direct instruction, as if Elena's presence was already woven into the morning's routine. Elena poured coffee into a chipped mug, the liquid dark and strong enough to strip paint. She took the basket and stepped outside into air so crisp it hurt to breathe. The sun was just clearing the eastern ridge, painting everything gold and amber. Chickens clucked and scattered as she approached the coop, their bodies warm and soft when she reached beneath them for eggs. She found 17, some still warm from the hen, and carried them back carefully. Sarah nodded approval and pointed to a pan already heating on the stove. "Scramble those. Lucy likes them soft. Jacob prefers them firm. You figure out your own preference." Elena cracked eggs, whisked them, poured them into the sizzling butter. The simple act felt foreign after so long. Cooking for people, being part of something ordinary and domestic. Her hands remembered the motions even if her heart had forgotten what it felt like to belong in a kitchen. Lucy appeared like a small whirlwind, her hair even wilder than yesterday, her feet still bare despite the morning chill. "Elena, you're still here. I told Daddy you would be, but he said not to count on it, but I knew. I just knew." "Lucy." Jacob's voice came from the doorway, gentle but firm. "Let her breathe." He looked tired, Elena noticed. Lines around his eyes suggested he hadn't slept well, and there was a tightness in his jaw that spoke of someone carrying weight he couldn't put down. He nodded to Elena, acknowledgement, nothing more, and took his seat at the table. They ate together again, falling into the same rhythm as the night before. Lucy talked about helping her father mend the fence in the south pasture, about a book Miss Sarah was reading to her, about whether the barn cat might finally have her kittens today. Jacob ate steadily, occasionally answering his daughter with a word or two, his attention mostly on his plate. But Elena felt him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, assessing, calculating, trying to figure out what kind of trouble she represented. When breakfast ended, Sarah handed Elena an apron. "Garden needs weeding. Lucy can show you which are plants and which aren't." "I know plants," Elena said quietly. Sarah's eyebrows rose slightly. "Farm girl?" "Once, long time ago." "Hands don't forget." Sarah turned back to her dishes. "Work until noon, then come in for lunch. We keep regular hours here. It's easier that way." Elena followed Lucy outside. The garden stretched behind the house, neat rows of vegetables fighting against encroaching weeds. Lucy chattered as they worked, pulling weeds with more enthusiasm than accuracy. But Elena found herself settling into the rhythm, the pull of roots from soil, the sun warming her back, the simple satisfaction of making order from chaos. "Mama planted this garden," Lucy said suddenly, sitting back on her heels. "That's what Miss Sarah told me. She said Mama loved growing things, said she had hands that could make anything bloom. Do you think that's true? Can some people just make things grow better than others?" Elena looked at the girl, saw the longing beneath the question, the need to know her mother through stories, through fragments, through a garden that kept producing years after the gardener had died. "Yes," Elena said, "some people have that gift." "Do you?" Elena looked down at her hands, scarred and calloused, hands that had learned to take rather than nurture, to protect rather than create. "I used to think so. Before." "Before what?" "Before everything. Before the trial. Before her father's farm was taken. Before she learned that the world didn't care about innocence or truth, or the futures of young women who trusted the wrong people." "Before I had to leave home," Elena said instead. Lucy accepted this with a solemn nod, as if Elena had shared something profound. They worked in silence for a while, the sun climbing higher, sweat gathering at Elena's temples. Around mid-morning, Jacob appeared, leading a horse toward the barn. He paused when he saw them, his expression unreadable. "Lucy, go help Miss Sarah with lunch." The girl scrambled up and ran toward the house, leaving Elena alone with the man who'd given her shelter but not trust. Jacob walked closer, stopping a few feet away. "You know your way around a garden." "I told Sarah I did." "You tell her anything else about why you're running?" Elena's hands stilled in the dirt. "She didn't ask." "I'm asking." She looked up at him, meeting his dark eyes. "Does it matter? You said a few days. I'll work, I'll keep to myself, and then I'll move on. My past doesn't have to be part of this. My daughter brought you here. That makes it my business." His voice was quiet but implacable. "I need to know if trouble's coming behind you." Elena stood slowly, brushing dirt from her hands. 6 years ago, I was convicted of theft, stealing from the family I worked for. I didn't do it, but that didn't matter. They had evidence, had witnesses, had everything they needed to make it stick. I served 3 years in a women's prison in Colorado. When I got out, I found out my father had died while I was inside, that our farm had been sold for taxes I couldn't pay from a cell. I've been moving ever since because staying anywhere too long means people find out, means losing whatever work I can get, means starting over somewhere else. She held his gaze, refusing to look away. "That's what's behind me. A false conviction and a dead father and 3 years of my life I'll never get back. If that's the kind of trouble you're worried about, then yes, it follows me everywhere." Jacob's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. "What did they say you stole?" "Jewelry. A ruby necklace worth more than my father's farm. They found it in my room, wrapped in my shawl, and I had no way to prove I'd never seen it before that moment." Her voice was steady, but the words still burned. "The family was influential. The judge believed them. The jury took 40 minutes to convict me." "You ever find out who actually took it?" "No. But I know why they did it. My employer's son had been persistent. I refused him. 3 days later, the necklace appeared in my room, and I was arrested." She crossed her arms. "That's the truth. Believe it or don't. Either way, I'll be gone in a few days." Jacob was quiet for a long moment, his eyes searching her face. Finally, he nodded slowly. "I believe you." The word surprised her more than any accusation would have. "Why?" "Because I've heard enough lies to recognize the truth when I hear it, and because—" He paused, looking back toward the house. "Because sometimes good people get destroyed by bad circumstances and the world just moves on like it never happened." There was something personal in his tone, some echo of his own losses that made Elena realize she wasn't the only one carrying weight here. "Your wife," she said quietly. "Lucy said she died." His jaw tightened. 3 years ago, she got sick, something in her lungs. Doctor said it was consumption, said she might have a year if we were lucky. She had 8 months. He looked away toward the mountains. "Lucy barely remembers her. Sometimes that feels like mercy. Other times it feels like the cruelest thing of all. I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't bring her back." His voice was harsh, but Elena heard the grief beneath it, still raw, still unhealed. Sorry doesn't explain why she spent her last months terrified, looking over her shoulder, jumping at every sound. Sorry doesn't answer the questions she wouldn't talk about, the fear I saw in her eyes when she thought I wasn't watching. Elena frowned. She was afraid? Of what? Jacob's eyes snapped back to her, and she saw him realize he'd said too much. Doesn't matter now. She's gone, and whatever scared her died with her. But Elena heard the lie in his voice, saw the tension in his shoulders. Margaret Hale had been afraid of something, and Jacob still didn't know what. The not knowing was eating at him, had been for 3 years, was part of the reason he looked like a man who'd forgotten how to rest. Before she could respond, Sarah's voice called from the house. "Lunch!" Jacob turned without another word and walked away, leaving Elena standing in the garden with dirt under her fingernails and more questions than she'd had that morning. Lunch was cold chicken and bread, simple and filling. Lucy dominated the conversation again, and Elena was grateful. The girls' chatter filled the silences, prevented any awkward questions, kept everything surface level and safe. After the meal, Sarah set Elena to work on mending. A basket full of clothes with torn hems, missing buttons, seams that had given way. Elena took the basket to the porch, where the light was good, and settled into the rhythm of needle and thread, repairs she could make with her hands while her mind wandered. She'd learned to sew in prison. The matron had taught a few of the women who showed aptitude, said it was better than letting them sit idle. Elena had discovered she liked the precision of it, the way you could take something broken and make it whole again, the visible proof that damage could be undone. She was halfway through a shirt, Jacob's, she realized, recognizing it from breakfast, when hoofbeats sounded in the yard. She looked up to see two riders approaching, both wearing badges that caught the afternoon sun. Her stomach dropped. Every instinct screamed run, but there was nowhere to go, no time to disappear before they saw her. Jacob emerged from the barn, wiping his hands on a rag. The lawmen dismounted, and Elena recognized the older one, Sheriff Porter, the same man who'd ignored her letters when she'd written from prison, trying to convince someone to investigate the real thief. "Jacob," Porter's voice was cordial, but carried an edge. "Didn't expect to see you until the town meeting next week." "I stay busy." Jacob's tone was neutral, but Elena saw the way his body had tensed, the way he positioned himself between the lawmen and the house. "Something I can help you with?" The younger deputy, Elena didn't know him, gestured toward the porch. "Who's that?" "Hired help. Why?" "We heard there was a woman in town yesterday, caused some trouble at the diner. Description matches." Porter's eyes narrowed as he studied Elena. "We like to know who's passing through, make sure there's no outstanding warrants, no trouble following them." Jacob's voice stayed level. "She's working here. No trouble, no warrants. That satisfy your curiosity?" Might not." Porter started toward the porch, and Elena forced herself to stay seated, to keep her hands steady on the mending even though every nerve was screaming. "What's your name, miss?" "Elena Cross." She watched recognition flicker across Porter's face, watched him remember the trial, the conviction, the young woman sent away in chains. "Well now, Elena Cross. Thought you looked familiar." His smile was cold. "You're a long way from Colorado." "I've been released, served my time. I'm allowed to travel freely." Her voice was calm, but her heart was hammering. "Released, sure, but that doesn't mean folks are eager to have you around. Thief's a thief, no matter how much time you serve." He looked at Jacob. "You know what she is? What she did?" "I know what she was convicted of." Jacob's voice had gone hard. "I also know she's working for her keep and causing no trouble on my land. Unless you've got actual business here, Sheriff, I've got work to do." Porter's eyes moved between them, calculating. "Just making sure you know what you're bringing into your home. You've got a young daughter, Jacob. Might want to think about the example you're setting." "I don't need advice on raising my daughter." Jacob's voice dropped to something dangerous. "And I don't appreciate you coming onto my property to give it. Elena's working here legally, and unless you've got a warrant or a legitimate complaint, you can leave." The tension stretched like wire. Finally, Porter shrugged. "Your choice. But when things go missing, don't say you weren't warned." He remounted his horse, the deputy following suit. They rode away slowly, deliberately, making sure their presence was felt. Jacob waited until they were out of sight before turning to Elena. She stood, the mending forgotten in her lap. "I should go," she said quietly, "before this becomes a problem for you. Sit down." "Jacob, you heard him. I said sit down." He climbed the porch steps, taking the chair beside her. "Porter's been looking for ways to cause me trouble since Margaret died. This isn't about you, it's about him flexing authority he doesn't actually have." "Why would he have a problem with you?" Jacob was quiet for a moment, staring out at the empty road. "Because I asked too many questions. About Margaret's death, about why she was so afraid those last months. Porter said I needed to let it go, that grief was making me see things that weren't there. When I wouldn't drop it, he made it clear I wasn't welcome in town unless I kept my mouth shut and my head down." Elena felt pieces clicking together. What kind of questions? About who she'd been talking to before she got sick. About the men she said were watching the house. About the papers she kept hidden in the barn, papers that disappeared the day after she died. His hands clenched. "She tried to tell me something was wrong, that something bad was happening, but she was so weak and so scared, and I thought it was the fever talking. By the time I realized she meant it, she was gone." "What was in the papers?" "I don't know. I never saw them. She told me where they were hidden, made me promise I'd find them if anything happened to her. But when I went to look, he shook his head. Gone, like they'd never existed. Elena's mind was racing. A woman who died afraid, papers that disappeared, a sheriff who wanted silence. None of it fit together yet, but the shape of something wrong was emerging from the fragments. The land grab, she said slowly, remembering stories she'd heard while traveling. There was something about corrupt land deals in Wyoming territories, families losing their farms, legal documents being forged. Margaret's family had land, good land, water rights, timber. After she married me, her father signed it over to us. After she died, men came saying the deed was fraudulent, that the land actually belonged to a development company out of Cheyenne. I fought it, but the courts ruled against me. Lost half our property in 6 months. His voice was bitter. Porter was there for every hearing, making sure I didn't cause trouble, making sure I accepted the ruling quietly. You think it's connected? Her fear? And the land? I think my wife knew something that got her killed, and I think the people responsible made sure no one would believe a dying woman's last words. He looked at Elena. And I think Porter knows exactly what happened and has been covering it up since the day they lowered her into the ground. The weight of it settled over them, two people carrying impossible truths no one wanted to hear, truths that had cost them everything. I can't help you, Elena said quietly. I'm nobody. An ex-convict with no credibility, no resources, no power. If I start asking questions, they'll run me out of town or worse. I'm not asking you to help. I'm asking you to understand why I don't give a damn what Porter thinks about who I hire. He met her eyes. You served time for something you didn't do. My wife died trying to expose something evil, and no one listened. We've both learned that the law doesn't always serve justice. So when Porter shows up on my land trying to intimidate you, trying to remind you of your place, I don't accept it, and I won't let him run you off because it's convenient for him. Elena felt something shift in her chest, some wall cracking that she'd built to protect herself. Why do you care? Because Lucy brought you here for a reason, and because... He paused, choosing words carefully. Because sometimes standing up for someone else is the only way to remember you're still human. The door opened and Lucy bounded out, oblivious to the tension. Elena, can you help me feed the chickens? Miss Sarah says I can if you come too. Elena looked at the girl, then at Jacob, then back at the mending in her lap. The shirt she'd been repairing, proof that broken things could be made whole if someone cared enough to try. Yes, she said, I'll help. Lucy grabbed her hand and pulled her up, chattering about the chickens' names and which ones were mean and which ones laid the prettiest eggs. Elena let herself be led away, but she felt Jacob's eyes on her back, felt the weight of shared understanding settling between them, like a promise neither had spoken aloud. That evening, after supper, and after Lucy had been put to bed, Elena found herself on the porch again. The night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like salt spilled on black velvet. She could hear Jacob inside, moving around the kitchen, the clink of dishes being washed. She should be planning her departure, should be thinking about where to go next, which town might offer work, which road might lead to something better. But instead she was calculating how many hours she'd stayed already. How many more she could justify before leaving became harder than staying. The door opened and Jacob stepped out, carrying 2 cups. He handed one to Elena, coffee, still hot, bitter, and strong. Couldn't sleep? He asked. Haven't been able to sleep properly in 6 years. Don't see that changing now. He sat in the chair beside her, long legs stretched out, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. Lucy asked me tonight if you were staying. I told her I didn't know. She said she hoped you would. I'll break her heart when I leave. Probably, but she's stronger than she looks. He sipped his coffee. Sarah thinks you should stay too. Says you work hard, don't complain, know what you're doing. That's high praise from her. What do you think? He was quiet for a long time. I think you've been running so long, you've forgotten what it feels like to stand still. I think whatever happened 6 years ago broke something in you that hasn't healed. And I think... He paused. I think maybe you need to stay somewhere long enough to remember who you were before the world told you who you had to be. The words cut deeper than any accusation. Elena felt tears burn behind her eyes, fought them back. "I don't know if that person still exists," she whispered. "Only one way to find out." They sat in silence, drinking coffee that had gone lukewarm, listening to the night sounds of the ranch settling around them. An owl called from the barn. Horses shifted in their stalls. Somewhere distant, a coyote howled, lonely and wild. "I was someone's daughter once," Elena said finally. "Someone's helper, someone's friend. I had a future planned, a small one, nothing grand, but mine. Then in one day, it all disappeared. And I learned that the world doesn't care about your plans, doesn't care about your truth, doesn't care about anything except what it can take from you." "That's not the whole world," Jacob said quietly. "That's just the part that broke you. It's the only part I've seen in 6 years. Then maybe you've been looking in the wrong places." She turned to him, studying his profile in the starlight. "You lost your wife. You lost your land. You're raising a daughter alone in a place where the law works against you. How do you still believe there's good left?" "Because of Lucy. Because she reminds me every day that hope isn't stupidity and trust isn't weakness." He met her eyes. "And because if I let what happened to Margaret turn me into something bitter and broken, then the people who killed her win twice. They take her life and they take mine. I won't give them that." Elena wanted to believe him, wanted to think that staying could be different, that this place could be sanctuary instead of just another stop before the next disaster. But belief required risk, and risk required trust, and trust was something she'd had beaten out of her one rejection at a time. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "How to stay. How to be part of something again." "Neither do I most days, but we're doing it anyway." He stood, taking her empty cup. "Get some rest. Tomorrow we've got fence to mend in the south pasture. I could use the help." He went inside, leaving Elena alone with the stars and the night, and a decision that felt heavier than any she'd made in years. Stay or go, trust or run, risk being hurt again or guarantee she'd never heal. The smart choice was obvious, the safe choice was clear. But for the first time in 6 years, Elena found herself wondering if smart and safe had been getting her anywhere worth going. Inside the house, a lamp flickered out. Lucy's window went dark. Sarah's door closed with a soft click. And Elena sat on the porch until the stars began to fade, wrestling with the terrifying possibility that maybe, just maybe, she'd found a place that didn't want her to leave. 3 weeks passed before Elena realized she'd stopped counting days. The realization came one morning while she was collecting eggs, the familiar weight of the basket against her hip, the chickens clucking their protests as she reached beneath warm feathers. She paused mid-reach, hand suspended in the air, struck by the sudden awareness that she couldn't remember the last time she'd calculated distance to the next town, or plotted which road to take when she left. The thought should have panicked her. Instead, it settled over her like the morning sun, warm, gradual, undeniable. She'd stopped planning her escape because somewhere between mending Jacob's shirts and teaching Lucy to braid her wild hair, between weeding Margaret's garden and sitting on the porch in comfortable silence, Elena had begun to believe she might be allowed to stay. The routine had absorbed her so completely she barely recognized herself anymore. Dawn chores with Sarah, who taught her to make biscuits the way Lucy liked them, light and flaky with honey butter. Mid-morning work in the garden or helping Jacob with whatever needed fixing, fences, barn doors, the chicken coop that always seemed on the verge of collapse. Afternoons teaching Lucy arithmetic while Sarah prepared supper, the girl's eager face bent over her slate as she worked through problems. Evenings on the porch, sometimes alone, sometimes with Jacob, conversations growing longer and easier as the days accumulated. She'd even begun sleeping through the night, her body finally accepting that she didn't need to wake every few hours ready to run. But that morning, as she carried the eggs back to the house, something felt different. The air had a quality to it, a heaviness that made the hair on her arms stand up. Sarah noticed it too, standing in the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed, eyes scanning the horizon. "Storm coming," Sarah said. "Big one by the feel of it. We'll need to secure everything before it hits." They spent the morning preparing, bringing tools into the barn, checking that the shutters were sound, moving the chickens into their covered run. Jacob worked with methodical intensity, his movements sharp and focused in a way that suggested the weather wasn't the only thing weighing on his mind. Lucy followed Elena everywhere, chattering nervously about storms she'd seen before, about the time lightning struck the oak tree by the creek, about whether the barn cats would be safe. The girl's anxiety was palpable, and Elena found herself offering reassurances she half believed, promises that everything would be fine even as the sky darkened to the color of old bruises. By noon, the wind had picked up, carrying the smell of rain and ozone. Sarah sent Lucy inside to help prepare food they could eat cold if the storm knocked out the stove. Elena was securing the last of the garden tools when Jacob appeared beside her, his expression grim. "Need you to help me with something in the barn." His tone made it clear this wasn't about storm preparation. Elena followed him across the yard, wind whipping her skirt around her legs, dust stinging her eyes. Inside the barn, the air was close and still, heavy with the smell of hay and leather and horses shifting nervously in their stalls. Jacob led her to the far corner, to a section of wall that looked solid and unremarkable. He pressed against a particular board, and Elena heard a click. A panel swung inward, revealing a hollow space behind the wall. "Margaret's hiding place," he said quietly. "The one she told me about before she died. The one that was empty when I finally looked." Elena's heart kicked against her ribs. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because I think I was wrong. I think the papers weren't taken. I think Margaret moved them. She was getting sicker, getting more afraid, and I think she hid them somewhere else, somewhere even I wouldn't think to look." He ran his hand along the empty space, frustration evident in every line of his body. "I've searched this barn 100 times, tore it apart, looking for anything she might have left behind. Found nothing. Maybe there was nothing to find. Maybe she destroyed them." "No." His voice was certain. "She made me promise I'd find them. Made me swear on Lucy's life that I wouldn't let what she knew die with her. She wouldn't have made me promise if she'd destroyed the evidence." Thunder rumbled in the distance, low and threatening. Elena studied the hidden compartment, the careful construction that had kept it concealed for years. "If she moved them," Elena said slowly, "she would have put them somewhere meaningful, somewhere connected to her but not obvious. I've checked everywhere that mattered to her, the house, the garden, even the spot by the creek where we used to—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "Everywhere." Elena thought about the things she'd learned about Margaret Hale over the past 3 weeks, about the woman who'd planted a garden that still bloomed years after her death, who'd raised a daughter with enough love that the child still radiated trust despite losing her mother, who'd spent her final months terrified but determined to expose some terrible truth. "What did she love most?" Elena asked. "Besides you and Lucy." Jacob was quiet for a long moment. "Her quilts. She made beautiful quilts, spent hours stitching them together, said it helped her think, helped her pray, helped her make sense of the world." His eyes widened slightly. "There's a trunk full of them in the attic, quilts she made, quilts her mother made, ones she was saving for Lucy when she got older. Have you looked through them?" "No, I couldn't. After she died, I couldn't touch her things. Sarah packed them away, said we'd go through them when I was ready." He was already moving toward the ladder that led to the loft. "I've never been ready." They climbed together, dust motes swirling in the dim light filtering through cracks in the walls. The attic was cramped and hot, filled with the detritus of years, broken furniture, old tools, boxes labeled in Margaret's neat handwriting. In the corner sat a large cedar trunk, undisturbed, waiting. Jacob knelt beside it, his hand hovering over the latch. Elena saw him steel himself, saw the cost of opening this box, and facing what he'd been avoiding for 3 years. The lid creaked open. Inside, folded with careful precision, were quilts in every color and pattern. Jacob lifted them out one by one, his hands gentle, reverent. Elena could see him remembering. Margaret's hands stitching these pieces together, her voice humming while she worked, the domestic peace of evenings spent creating beauty from scraps. They were nearly to the bottom of the trunk when Elena felt it. A quilt heavier than the others, something rigid sewn into the backing. She met Jacob's eyes. "This one." He took it from her, unfolded it carefully. It was a wedding ring pattern, interlocking circles in blues and creams, beautiful and complex. Jacob ran his hand over the surface, and Elena saw him find what she'd felt, a section where the stitching was different, newer, done in haste rather than with Margaret's usual precision. His knife appeared in his hand. He cut the stitches carefully, one by one, and reached into the opening. When his hand emerged, it held a leather portfolio wrapped in oilcloth to protect it from moisture. Thunder cracked overhead, loud enough to rattle the barn. The storm had arrived. Jacob's hand shook as he unwrapped the portfolio. Inside were papers, legal documents, letters, a journal filled with Margaret's handwriting. He spread them out on the trunk lid, and Elena leaned closer, reading over his shoulder. What she saw made her blood run cold. Deeds. Forged deeds transferring land ownership from families to a development company called Territorial Holdings. Correspondence between Sheriff Porter and a lawyer named Coleman discussing payment for facilitated transfers. A list of names, families who'd lost their land, dates beside each one, amounts of money changing hands. And Margaret's journal, documenting everything she'd discovered. How she'd stumbled onto the scheme when her own family's land was targeted. How she'd started investigating quietly. How she'd realized the corruption went deeper than anyone knew. Territorial Holdings was owned by three men, Coleman the lawyer, Porter the sheriff, and Marcus Webb, a territorial judge who'd ruled on every disputed land claim in the past 5 years. They'd been stealing land systematically, forging documents, using the law itself as a weapon. Families who fought back found themselves facing charges, trespassing on their own property, destruction of evidence, contempt of court. Those who accepted the rulings quietly lost everything but avoided prison. Margaret had documented it all. Dates, names, amounts. She'd collected original deeds that proved the forgeries, had copies of letters showing the conspiracy, had testimony from families too afraid to speak publicly. And at the bottom of the pile, a letter addressed to Jacob, dated 2 days before Margaret died. Jacob's hands trembled as he unfolded it. Elena watched his face as he read, watched grief and rage and understanding wash over him in waves. When he finished, he handed it to Elena without speaking. The handwriting was shaky, deteriorated by illness, but the words were clear. My dearest Jacob, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you everything while I still had time. I tried to be brave, tried to expose them while I was still strong enough to fight, but they found out. The night I got sick, Coleman came to the house while you were in town. He told me to stop asking questions or you and Lucy would pay the price. He brought me tea, insisted I drink it while he watched, said it would help me calm down. I got sick that very night. The doctor says it's consumption, but Jacob, I was fine before that tea. I think they poisoned me. I think they're killing me slowly enough that no one will question it, and I can't prove it because the only witness is the man who did it. I'm terrified, but I can't let them win. I've hidden everything I found, all the proof of what they've done, all the evidence that could stop them. You have to find it. You have to make sure people know the truth. These men have destroyed families, stolen futures, corrupted every institution meant to protect us. But Jacob, please be careful. They've already taken me. Don't let them take you too. Don't let Lucy grow up alone. Promise me you'll be smart about this, that you'll find someone who can help, someone beyond their reach. I love you. I loved every moment we had together. I'm sorry I couldn't be braver, couldn't fight harder. Take care of our girl. Tell her I tried. Always yours. Margaret Elena's hands were shaking when she lowered the letter. She looked at Jacob, saw tears streaming down his face, saw 3 years of questions finally answered in the cruelest possible way. They murdered her, he said, his voice raw. They murdered my wife and I let them. I believed the doctor, believed it was just bad luck, just sickness, just... His voice broke. I should have known, should have seen it. You couldn't have known. She made sure of that because she was trying to protect you. She shouldn't have had to protect me. He slammed his fist against the trunk, the sound sharp in the enclosed space. She should have been able to tell me, and I should have been able to stop them, and she should still be alive. Lightning flashed, illuminating the barn in stark white light. Thunder followed immediately, shaking the walls. The storm was directly overhead now. Elena gathered the papers carefully, her mind already racing ahead. We have to take this to someone who can actually do something with it. Who? Porter owns the sheriff's office. Webb controls the courts. Coleman has connections in Cheyenne that reach all the way to the territorial governor. Jacob's voice was bitter. Margaret knew all this. That's why she was so afraid. There's no one to take it to. There has to be someone. Federal marshals, territorial authorities, beyond Webb's jurisdiction, someone. And what proof do we have that any of them aren't bought too? What if we hand this over and it disappears? What if we expose ourselves and they come after Lucy the way they came after Margaret? His eyes were wild with fear and rage. I won't risk my daughter. I won't. So what? We do nothing? We let Margaret's death mean nothing? We let them keep stealing, keep destroying lives? Elena's voice rose to match his. You said you wouldn't let them win. You said if you gave up, they'd take Margaret's life and yours. Well, doing nothing is giving up. Don't you dare, Jacob started, but Elena cut him off. I know what it costs to fight when the whole system is rigged against you. I know what it feels like to stand in a courtroom and watch them destroy you with lies while everyone who's supposed to protect you looks the other way. I lived through that, and I'm telling you, the only thing worse than fighting and losing is not fighting at all. Her words echoed in the sudden silence. They stared at each other, both breathing hard, both carrying the weight of injustice that had shaped their lives. Rain began hammering the barn roof, a deafening roar that made conversation impossible. Jacob gathered the papers, wrapped them carefully back in the oilcloth, and climbed down the ladder. Elena followed, her heart pounding, her mind spinning with possibilities and dangers. In the barn below, Jacob stood with the portfolio clutched against his chest, staring at nothing. Elena approached slowly. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I shouldn't have. No, you're right. His voice was flat, exhausted. Margaret died trying to do the right thing, and I've spent 3 years being too afraid to finish what she started. But I'm afraid, Elena. I'm terrified that if I push this, they'll come after Lucy. That I'll lose her the way I lost Margaret, that she'll end up alone because her father couldn't let the past stay buried. Or she'll grow up knowing her father honored her mother's memory by making sure her death meant something. Elena moved closer. Lucy's strong. Sarah's smart. You're not alone in this, Jacob. Not anymore. He looked at her, really looked at her, and Elena saw the moment he understood what she was offering. Not just support, but partnership. Not just sympathy, but shared purpose. Why would you risk this, he asked. You could leave right now, walk away clean. This isn't your fight. Maybe it is. Maybe it always has been. Elena thought about the forged evidence that had destroyed her life, about the influential family who'd used the law to punish her for refusing to be victimized. I was alone when they came for me. No one stood with me. No one fought for me. I won't let that happen to you. The rain pounded harder, water beginning to seep through cracks in the barn walls. Jacob tucked the portfolio inside his shirt, protecting it from the elements. We need to be smart about this. Can't just walk into the territorial office and hand over evidence against a sitting judge. He was thinking now, planning, the shock giving way to strategic calculation. We need copies. We need to get this information to multiple people simultaneously so they can't suppress it all. And we need to do it in a way that doesn't give them time to retaliate. There's a newspaper in Laramie. Independent, not controlled by local interests. If we could get a reporter to investigate, they'd need to verify everything first. That takes time, and time gives Coleman and Porter a chance to act. Jacob paced, nervous energy crackling through him like the lightning outside. We need leverage, something that forces them to act before they can organize a response. Elena's mind was racing through possibilities when she remembered something from her own trial. The Territorial Attorney General's office. They have jurisdiction over corruption cases, and they're appointed by Washington, not local authorities. If we could get this evidence to them, they're in Cheyenne, 2 days' ride minimum, 3 if the weather stays bad. Jacob looked toward the barn doors where rain was now falling in sheets. And we can't both go. Someone needs to stay with Lucy, needs to keep things looking normal so Porter doesn't suspect anything. Then I'll go. Jacob's head snapped around. What? I'll take the evidence to Cheyenne. I'm nobody, just hired help passing through. If I disappear for a few days, Porter won't think twice about it. Probably assume I finally moved on like he expected. Elena felt the plan solidifying even as she spoke. But you're known here. You leave, especially right after finding this evidence, and they'll know something's wrong. They'll act before we can stop them. It's too dangerous. If they realize what you're carrying, they won't. I've spent 6 years being invisible, being the person no one notices or remembers. I know how to disappear. She met his eyes. Let me do this. Let me help finish what Margaret started. Thunder crashed again, so loud it felt like the sky was breaking open. Jacob stared at her, conflict written across his face, the need to act warring with the fear of putting someone else at risk, the desire for justice colliding with the terror of losing anyone else he cared about. The realization that he cared about her hung between them, unspoken but undeniable. If anything happens to you, he started, nothing will happen. I'll be careful. I'll get there, hand over the evidence, and come back. She said it with more confidence than she felt, but the conviction in her voice was real. This is what I can do. Let me do it. The barn door burst open and Lucy ran in, soaked and scared, Sarah right behind her. Daddy! Lucy threw herself at Jacob, who caught her and held her close. The creek's rising. Miss Sarah says we might flood. Jacob's attention immediately shifted, the crisis of the storm taking precedence over everything else. Everyone in the house, now, we'll ride this out together. They ran through the rain, water plastering Elena's dress to her body, mud sucking at her boots. Inside the house, Sarah had already lit lamps and laid out blankets. They stripped off wet outer clothes, and Sarah handed out towels while Lucy pressed herself against her father's side. It's just a storm, sweetheart, Jacob said, his voice gentle despite the tension Elena could see in his shoulders. We're safe in here. But Elena saw him glance toward where he'd hidden the portfolio, saw the weight of decision pressing down on him. They had evidence that could expose murder and corruption, but they also had a frightened child who needed reassurance that the storm wouldn't take anything else from her. The evening passed in tense domesticity. Sarah made stew on the stove while the storm raged outside. Lucy stayed close to her father, seeking comfort in his presence. Elena helped where she could, but her mind was already on the road to Cheyenne, already planning the journey she knew she had to make. After Lucy finally fell asleep on the sofa, Sarah covered her with a quilt and looked between Jacob and Elena. I know something's happened, she said quietly. I can see it on both your faces. Whatever it is, you need to handle it smart. That child's been through enough. We will, Jacob promised. Sarah nodded, then headed to her room, leaving Jacob and Elena alone with the sleeping child and the storm and the evidence that could change everything. They sat in chairs by the fire, not speaking, listening to rain hammer the roof and wind rattle the windows. The portfolio sat on the table between them, an accusation and a responsibility and a choice they still had to make. When should I leave? Elena asked finally. Jacob didn't pretend not to understand. Tomorrow, soon as the rain lets up enough to travel. I'll pack supplies, give you money for the journey. There's a boarding house in Cheyenne run by a woman named Mrs. Chen. She's trustworthy. Tell her I sent you. What do I tell the Attorney General's office? The truth, all of it. Give them the evidence, tell them Margaret's story. Make them understand this isn't just about stolen land. It's about murder and conspiracy and corruption that reaches into every level of territorial government. His voice was hard. Make them care. And if they don't? Then we find another way. But we don't stop trying, not after everything Margaret sacrificed. Elena nodded. Outside, the storm began to ease, the rain settling into a steady rhythm rather than a deluge. Lucy stirred in her sleep, murmuring something unintelligible, and Jacob moved to adjust her blanket with the automatic care of a parent who'd performed the gesture 1,000 times. Looking at him, this man who'd lost everything and still chose to fight, who'd risked his safety and his daughter's to honor his dead wife's courage, Elena felt something shift inside her. Not just determination or shared purpose, but something deeper, more dangerous. She cared about him, about Lucy, about this place that had welcomed her when the world had turned her away. And tomorrow she'd ride into danger to protect them, carrying evidence that could destroy powerful men, hoping that somewhere in the machinery of justice there was still someone who cared about the truth. The fire crackled. The rain fell. And Elena Cross, who'd spent 6 years running from everything, sat in a quiet Wyoming house and chose to run toward something instead. Toward justice, toward truth, toward the possibility that maybe, just maybe, doing the right thing could actually matter. It was the most dangerous thing she'd done since the day she'd decided to stop and let a barefoot girl take her hand. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that there was no turning back now. Dawn broke gray and wet, the world washed clean by the storm but heavy with moisture that clung to everything like a second skin. Elena was already awake, had been for hours, lying in the narrow bed watching darkness give way to pale light, while her mind rehearsed the journey ahead. 2 days to Cheyenne if the roads weren't too damaged, if her horse stayed sound, if she didn't attract attention from the wrong people. She dressed in her sturdiest clothes, the ones Sarah had quietly mended and reinforced over the past weeks, and braided her hair tight against her skull. In the kitchen, Jacob was already moving, laying out supplies on the table with methodical precision. Dried meat, hardtack, a canteen, matches wrapped in oilcloth, money in a leather pouch, more than Elena had seen in 6 years. "That's too much," she said quietly. "It's what you'll need, boarding house, meals, bribes if necessary." His voice was rough with exhaustion. He looked like he hadn't slept at all. "Mrs. Chen's place is on 4th Street. Red door, sign says respectable lodging. Don't stay anywhere else. Cheyenne's got establishments that'll rob you blind or worse." Elena nodded, committing it to memory. Jacob handed her the oilcloth-wrapped portfolio, and the weight of it in her hands felt immense, like she was holding Margaret Hale's dying wish made solid. "The Attorney General's office is in the Territorial Building on Capitol Avenue. Ask for Vincent Morrison. He's the chief investigator, came up from Denver 2 years ago. He's got a reputation for being stubborn and honest, which around here means he hasn't been bought yet." Jacob's eyes were intense, urgent. "Don't talk to anyone else. Don't leave the evidence with clerks or deputies. Morrison himself, or you bring it back." "I understand." "And Elena—" He stopped, struggling with words. "If something goes wrong, if you sense any danger at all, you run. Drop everything and run. The evidence matters, but not as much as—" He couldn't finish the sentence, but she heard what he wasn't saying. "Not as much as you." Sarah appeared in the doorway, Lucy's hand in hers. The girl's eyes were red and puffy, her face set in that terrible expression children get when they're trying very hard not to cry. "You're really leaving?" Lucy's voice was small, wounded. Elena knelt, bringing herself eye level with the child who'd changed everything by asking a simple question 3 weeks ago. "Just for a few days. I have to go to Cheyenne to take care of something important." "But you're coming back?" The question held such desperate hope it physically hurt to hear. Elena looked up at Jacob, saw him nod almost imperceptibly, permission to make a promise that might be impossible to keep. "I'm coming back," Elena said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "I promise." Lucy threw her arms around Elena's neck, holding on with fierce intensity. Elena hugged her back, breathing in the child's sleep-warm scent, feeling the trust and affection and terrible vulnerability of this little person who'd somehow decided Elena was worth loving. "Be safe," Lucy whispered. "I will." Jacob had saddled one of his best horses, a sturdy bay mare with intelligent eyes and a calm temperament. Elena secured her small pack, tucked the portfolio carefully inside her coat, and mounted. The leather was cold and damp from the storm, and mist hung over the fields like smoke. Jacob handed her the reins, his hand lingering on hers for just a moment. 2 days there, 1 day to make your case, 2 days back. If you're not here in 6 days, I'm coming after you." "Don't. If I'm not back, it means something went wrong and you need to protect Lucy. That's what matters." "Elena, promise me, Jacob. Whatever happens, you protect your daughter first." His jaw clenched, but he nodded. "Ride careful. Watch for washouts from the storm, and trust your instincts. They've kept you alive this long." She urged the horse forward, looking back once to see them standing in the yard. Jacob tall and tense, Sarah solid and worried, Lucy waving with one hand while the other clutched her father's leg. The image burned itself into Elena's memory, something to hold on to when the road got long and dangerous. The first day's ride was slow and careful, the roads treacherous with mud and standing water. Elena passed farms and ranches, saw families assessing storm damage, heard the distant sound of hammers as people began repairs. She kept her head down, spoke to no one, moved with the purposeful invisibility she'd perfected over 6 years of being unwanted. By afternoon, she'd put 20 miles between herself and the Hale Ranch. The landscape gradually changed, becoming more populated as she approached the main road to Cheyenne. More travelers, more risk of recognition, more chance that word might filter back to Porter about a woman traveling alone with purpose in her eyes. She stopped at a creek to water the horse and eat some of the food Jacob had packed. The dried meat was tough but good, and she savored it slowly, making it last. While the mare drank, Elena pulled out the portfolio and checked it again, making sure the storm hadn't somehow damaged it despite all the layers of protection. The documents were safe, dry, damning. She read through Margaret's journal again, struck by how the handwriting deteriorated as the entries progressed, strong and steady at the beginning, shaky and desperate by the end. The last entry was dated 3 days before Margaret died, and it took Elena several tries to decipher the words. They know I know. Coleman came again today, brought more tea, watched me drink it. I'm so tired I can barely hold the pen. Jacob thinks it's just the sickness getting worse, but I can feel the poison working through me. I don't have much time. I've moved the evidence one last time, somewhere even they won't think to look. Somewhere Jacob will find it when he's ready. If I could just last long enough to see Lucy one more time, to tell Jacob I love him, to make them understand how sorry I am for bringing this danger to our door. But I think tonight might be my last night. I think tomorrow I'll be too weak to write. So I'll say it here, one final time. I love my family. I tried to do the right thing. I hope it was enough. Elena's hands shook as she wrapped the portfolio again. Margaret had known she was dying, had known her killers would face no consequences, had hidden the evidence anyway in the desperate hope that someday someone would care enough to use it. That someone was now Elena, a convicted thief with no credibility riding toward a city where powerful men had everything to lose if the truth came out. The absurdity of it would have been funny if the stakes weren't so high. She remounted and rode on, pushing to cover as many miles as possible before dark. She needed to reach Cheyenne by tomorrow afternoon, needed to deliver the evidence while she still had nerve and momentum and belief that this insane plan might actually work. As evening approached, she began looking for a place to camp. She'd stayed in worse places than the side of the road, and paying for lodging meant interaction with people who might remember her. Better to stay invisible, stay forgotten, stay... The sound of hoofbeats behind her cut through her thoughts. Elena turned in the saddle and saw 2 riders approaching fast, too fast to be casual travelers. Her stomach dropped as she recognized the younger one, the deputy who'd ridden out to the Hale Ranch with Sheriff Porter. She had seconds to decide. Run and confirm their suspicions, or stay calm and hope they were just passing through. The decision was made for her when they pulled alongside, boxing her in from both sides. "Well now," the deputy said, his smile cold. "Heading somewhere in a hurry?" "Cheyenne. Looking for work." Elena kept her voice level, bored, the tone of someone with nothing to hide. "That's so. Funny, because Sheriff Porter had a feeling you might try something stupid. Said to keep an eye on the roads, see if Jacob Hale's new helper decided to take a trip anywhere interesting." The other man, older and harder looking, edged his horse closer. "What's in the pack, sweetheart?" "Clothes. Food. Nothing that concerns you." "Everything on this road concerns us. Now you can hand over that pack nice and easy, or we can take it. Your choice." Elena's mind raced. If they searched the pack, they'd find the portfolio. If they found the evidence, Margaret's death would mean nothing, and Jacob would be marked for elimination, just like his wife had been. But if she fought, if she ran, she'd never make it. They were armed, and she wasn't, and the mare was tired from a day's hard riding. She reached for the pack, moving slowly, buying time to think. The older man's hand was already on his gun, watching for any sudden movement. "Easy now," the deputy said. "Just hand it over and we'll let you go on your way." It was a lie. Elena could hear it in his voice, see it in the way they'd positioned themselves. Even if she gave them the pack, they weren't letting her ride away. She knew too much, had seen too much, had become a liability the moment Jacob Hale had trusted her with the truth. So she did the only thing that made sense. She kicked the mare hard, yanking the reins to the left, and bolted. Shouts erupted behind her. The mare responded beautifully, surging forward with speed Elena hadn't known she possessed. Gunfire cracked, close enough that Elena felt the displacement of air, but the shots went wide as the horses scattered. She leaned low over the mare's neck, urging her faster, steering off the main road toward rougher terrain, where the bigger horses would have trouble following. Behind her, the men were cursing, reorganizing, coming after her with deadly intent. The landscape became a blur of sage and rock, the setting sun painting everything red and gold. The mare's hooves pounded rhythm that matched Elena's racing heart. Run, 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 the only song she'd ever truly known. A creek appeared ahead, swollen from the storm, running fast and deep. Elena aimed for it, praying the mare could jump, praying the men behind her would hesitate long enough for her to gain distance. The mare gathered herself and leaped. For one perfect moment they were flying, suspended between earth and water, and then they crashed down on the far bank, the mare stumbling but recovering, driving forward into the gathering darkness. Elena risked a glance back and saw the men at the creek's edge, their horses balking at the jump. The deputy was shouting something she couldn't hear, but she saw him pointing downstream, saw them turning to find a crossing point. She had minutes, maybe less. She pushed the mare hard, hating herself for it but knowing their lives depended on speed. The terrain was getting rougher, harder to navigate in fading light, but she didn't slow down. A tree line appeared ahead, dark and dense. Elena steered toward it, hoping the cover would hide her, hoping she could lose them in the darkness. The mare plunged into the trees, branches whipping at Elena's face and arms, the portfolio pressed against her ribs like a second heartbeat. She rode for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, until the mare was heaving and stumbling, until Elena knew she'd kill the horse if she pushed any further. She dismounted in a small clearing, her legs nearly giving out when she hit the ground. The mare stood with her head down, sides heaving, foam flecking her mouth. Elena quickly removed the saddle and rubbed the horse down with handfuls of dry grass, trying to cool her, trying to ease the strain she'd demanded. In the distance, she heard voices. The men were still searching, still hunting. Elena led the mare deeper into the trees, moving as quietly as possible, every snap twig making her freeze and listen. She found a depression in the ground, a natural hollow surrounded by thick undergrowth. It wasn't much, but it would have to do. She settled the mare in the deepest part, whispered soothing nonsense to calm her breathing, and pulled out the portfolio. If they found her, if they caught her, she needed to make sure the evidence survived. Elena looked around frantically, searching for somewhere to hide it, somewhere they wouldn't think to look even if they captured her. A lightning-struck tree stood at the edge of the clearing, its trunk split and hollow. Elena approached it carefully, checking for snakes or other inhabitants, then wedged the portfolio deep inside the hollow, covering it with loose bark and leaves. She memorized every detail of the tree's location, the 3 aspens to the left, the boulder shaped like a crouching bear, the way the clearing opened to the east. If she didn't make it, if Jacob came looking, she needed to be able to tell him where to find it. The voices were getting closer. Elena crept back to the mare, pressed herself against the animal's warm bulk, and waited in the darkness with her heart hammering and her breath coming in short, silent gasps. Footsteps. The snap of branches. A voice saying, "She came this way." I know she did. It's too dark. We'll never find her in this. Porter said bring her back or don't come back at all. A long pause. Elena could hear them breathing, hear the creak of leather as they shifted in their saddles. We'll camp here. Start fresh at first light. She's on foot or close to it. That horse can't have much left. We'll find her tomorrow. Relief and terror warred in Elena's chest. She had until dawn. After that, she was cornered, hunted, running out of options and time. She waited until she couldn't hear them anymore, until the woods fell into the kind of deep silence that meant she was alone. Then she carefully led the mare out of the hollow, moving in the opposite direction from the men's camp, putting as much distance as possible between her and certain capture. She walked through the night, leading the exhausted horse, every sound making her freeze and listen. The moon rose, casting silver light through the trees, making everything look ghostly and strange. Her feet blistered in her boots. Her arms ached from pulling the mare forward, but she kept moving because stopping meant dying, and dying meant Margaret's evidence stayed buried forever. By the time real dawn broke, pale and cold, Elena had covered maybe 5 miles. Not enough. Not nearly enough. The mare was done, could barely lift her feet, and Elena knew pushing her further would be cruel and pointless. She found another hiding spot, a dense thicket of scrub oak that provided cover from above. She settled the mare, gave her the last of the water from the canteen, and tried to think. The men would be searching systematically now that it was light. They knew roughly where she was, knew she couldn't move fast. It was only a matter of time before they found her. Unless she did something they didn't expect. Elena retrieved the portfolio from its hiding place in the hollow tree, moving as quickly as she dared, every moment expecting to hear shouts of discovery. She made it back to the thicket without incident and opened the oilcloth wrapping. She couldn't carry all the evidence. It was too bulky, too obvious, but she could carry the most important pieces. Elena selected the most damning documents, the forged deeds, the correspondence showing the conspiracy, Margaret's journal. She folded them carefully, tucked them inside her dress against her skin, then rewrapped the remaining papers and buried them under a distinctive rock formation she could describe to Jacob. She was tearing her petticoat to make bandages for the mare's legs when she heard it. Voices. Close. Too close. Tracks here. Fresh ones. Elena's blood turned to ice. She had seconds. She grabbed the mare's reins, ready to run again, even though she knew it was hopeless. The undergrowth parted and the deputy stepped through, gun drawn, smile triumphant. End of the line, sweetheart. Where's the evidence? Elena backed up, the mare between her and the gun. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't play stupid. We know Hale found something, know he sent you to Cheyenne with it. Now hand it over, and maybe we'll let you walk away from this. Another lie. She could see it in his eyes, in the way his finger rested on the trigger. I burned it, Elena said. Last night, when I knew you'd catch me. Burned every page. Rage flashed across his face. You're lying! Am I? Search me if you want. Search the horse. You won't find anything because there's nothing to find. She forced confidence into her voice, forced herself to meet his eyes without flinching. It's gone. Whatever Jacob thought he had, it's ashes now. The deputy studied her, trying to read truth from lie. Elena held perfectly still, barely breathing, the documents pressed against her skin, feeling like they were burning through the fabric. We'll see about that. He gestured with the gun. Start walking, back toward the road. Try anything, and I'll shoot the horse first. Make you watch her die before I deal with you. Elena's mind raced as she walked, the deputy behind her, his partner appearing from the trees to join them. 2 armed men, her on foot with a lamed horse, the most important evidence she'd ever carried hidden against her body. They were halfway back to the road when salvation came from an unexpected direction. A rider appeared on the ridge above them, silhouetted against the morning sun. Then another. Then 3 more. All armed, all wearing the distinctive badges of territorial marshals. The deputy cursed viciously. What the hell are they doing here? His partner looked panicked. Someone must have sent for them. We need to go, now. We're not done. We're done if we get arrested for assaulting a civilian. Move! They spurred their horses and disappeared into the trees, leaving Elena standing alone with her trembling mare as the marshals rode down to meet her. The lead marshal was a weathered man in his 50s, his face carved into hard lines by years of frontier justice. He dismounted slowly, eyes assessing Elena with professional thoroughness. You all right, miss? Elena's voice shook when she answered. Yes, thank you. Those men, we've been tracking them since yesterday. Got word there might be trouble on this road, decided to investigate. His eyes narrowed. You wouldn't happen to know anything about that, would you? Elena made a decision in that moment, a choice between safety and truth. She reached into her dress and pulled out the folded documents, held them out to the marshal with shaking hands. My name is Elena Cross. I'm carrying evidence of corruption, land theft, and murder. I was trying to get it to the Attorney General's office in Cheyenne when those men attacked me. She met his eyes. I need to speak with Vincent Morrison. It's urgent. The marshal took the documents, unfolded them carefully, and began to read. Elena watched his expression change from skepticism to shock to grim determination. When he looked up, his voice was hard as iron. Miss Cross, I'm Marshal Thomas Webb, no relation to the judge mentioned in these papers, in case you're wondering. And I think you and I need to have a very long conversation about exactly what you've stumbled into. Elena's knees nearly gave out with relief. Can you get me to Morrison? Can you make sure this reaches someone who'll actually do something? I can do better than that. Morrison's in Laramie right now, investigating complaints about Territorial Land Office. He's 2 hours' ride from here. Webb gestured to his men. Collins, take Miss Cross's horse back to town. Get her treated and rested. Davidson, ride for Laramie. Tell Morrison we're bringing him evidence he needs to see immediately. The rest of you, with me and Miss Cross. We're getting her somewhere safe, and then we're going to hear this whole story from the beginning. As they rode toward Laramie, Elena finally let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, Margaret's death wouldn't be for nothing after all. Vincent Morrison was a lean man with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. He sat across from Elena in a small office above the Laramie Marshal Station. The recovered evidence spread across his desk like accusations made solid. He'd been reading for 2 hours, occasionally asking questions in a voice that carried the weight of authority earned rather than inherited. Elena had told him everything, about Lucy taking her hand in the dusty street, about Jacob's search for truth in his wife's death, about Margaret's hidden journal and the portfolio sewn into a wedding quilt, about the chase through the woods and the men who'd tried to silence her the same way they'd silenced Margaret Hale. Morrison set down the last page of Margaret's journal and leaned back in his chair, his expression carved from granite. This is extensive, detailed, the kind of documentation that ends careers and starts prison sentences. He looked at Elena with something that might have been respect. Mrs. Hale was meticulous. She was dying. She knew she had to be. Elena's voice was hoarse from talking. Will it be enough? Enough to open an investigation? Absolutely. Enough to guarantee convictions? He gestured to the papers. We'll need corroboration. Testimony from the families who lost land, handwriting analysis on the forged documents, bank records showing money transfers. But yes, Miss Cross, this is enough to burn their operation to the ground. Relief made Elena's eyes sting. How long? For what? Until they're arrested, until Jacob and Lucy are safe, until the people who killed Margaret Hale face justice. Morrison's expression softened slightly. I can have warrants issued within 24 hours. We'll coordinate with federal marshals to execute arrests simultaneously. Porter in Ridgefield, Coleman at his office, Judge Webb in Chambers. We move fast, move clean. Give them no time to destroy evidence or coordinate alibis. He paused. But Miss Cross, you need to understand what this means. You'll be called to testify. Your past conviction will be examined, used by defense attorneys to discredit you. It won't be pleasant. I don't care about pleasant. I care about making sure Margaret's death means something. Then we're in agreement. Morrison gathered the documents carefully. Marshal Webb will escort you back to Ridgefield. I want you somewhere secure until we execute the warrants. After that, you'll need to make a formal statement, sign depositions, prepare for what comes next. Elena nodded, exhaustion finally catching up with her. She'd ridden through a storm, fled armed men, hidden in the woods, and carried the weight of a dead woman's courage across dangerous miles. Her body ached, her mind felt scraped raw, but underneath it all was a fierce satisfaction that she'd done what she'd promised. She'd finished what Margaret started. Marshal Webb rode beside her on the journey back, his presence solid and reassuring. They covered the distance in a day and a half, pushing hard but not recklessly. When the Hale Ranch finally came into view, the late afternoon sun painting everything gold, Elena felt something loosen in her chest. Home. The word surfaced before she could stop it, dangerous and hopeful in equal measure. Jacob must have been watching the road because he was running before they'd even reached the yard, his face a mixture of relief and fear. Elena dismounted, and he was there, his hands on her shoulders, eyes searching her face. You're alive. You're safe. I thought, when you didn't come back. His voice broke. I'm fine. And it's done. The evidence is with the Territorial Attorney General. Warrants are being issued. Elena saw the impact of her words hit him, saw 6 years of grief and helplessness begin to crack. They're going to arrest them all, Jacob. Porter, Coleman, Webb. They're going to pay for what they did to Margaret. He pulled her into his arms then, holding her so tight she could barely breathe, and she felt him shaking with emotion he'd been holding back too long. Over his shoulder, she saw Lucy running from the house, Sarah following at a more dignified pace, both their faces bright with relief. Lucy threw herself at them, wrapping her small arms around both their legs. You came back. You promised, and you came back. Elena knelt and pulled the girl into a hug, breathing in her familiar scent, feeling the fierce strength in her small body. I told you I would. Did you do the important thing? The thing you had to do in Cheyenne? Yes, sweetheart. I did. Sarah approached, her weathered face unreadable but her eyes suspiciously bright. Well, I suppose you'll be wanting supper then. Can't have people gallivanting across the territory on empty stomachs. It was as close to sentiment as Sarah ever got, and Elena found herself smiling despite everything. That sounds perfect. Marshal Webb declined the invitation to stay, tipping his hat to the assembled group. I'll be back tomorrow with Morrison and the arrest warrants. Until then, I'd suggest you all stay close to home. Once this breaks open, there'll be questions, probably reporters, definitely lawyers. Best to be prepared. After he left, they went inside together. Sarah had clearly been stress cooking. The table was laden with more food than 4 people could possibly eat. They sat together, and Elena found herself ravenous, eating with single-minded focus, while Lucy chattered about everything that had happened while she was gone. Daddy was worried, Lucy said matter-of-factly. He kept walking around at night, looking out the windows, checking the road. Miss Sarah said he was being foolish, that you could take care of yourself, but he did it anyway. Jacob had the grace to look embarrassed. I wasn't worried, I was just concerned. You barely slept, Sarah added helpfully. Wore a path in the floorboards with all your pacing. Sarah, I'm just stating facts. Elena caught Jacob's eye across the table and saw warmth there, concern that had transformed into relief, and something deeper that neither of them was quite ready to name. She looked away first, focusing on her plate, but she could feel him watching her. After supper, after Lucy had been coaxed to bed with promises that Elena would still be there in the morning, Jacob and Elena found themselves on the porch again. The familiar rhythm of it, the two of them, darkness settling, stars emerging overhead, felt like coming home after a long journey. Tell me what happened, Jacob said quietly. All of it. So Elena did. She described the chase, the creek jump, hiding in the woods with Porter's men hunting her. She told him about the marshals appearing like Providence, about Morrison's grim determination, about the warrants being prepared even as they spoke. When she finished, Jacob was quiet for a long time. You could have died. They could have killed you and buried the evidence and no one would have known. But they didn't, and the evidence is safe, and Margaret's story is finally going to be heard. Because of you. His voice was intense. Because you risked everything for people you barely knew, for a woman you never met, for justice you had every reason not to believe in anymore. I did it because it was right, and because... Elena paused, choosing words carefully. Because you and Lucy and Sarah, you gave me something I thought I'd lost forever. You gave me a reason to believe that fighting for the truth actually matters, that good people still exist, that I could be part of something bigger than just surviving one more day. Jacob reached over and took her hand, his calloused palm warm against hers. You're part of this family now. Whether you plan to be or not, whether you think you deserve it or not, you are. Lucy loves you, Sarah respects you, and He stopped, struggling with words. I don't want you to leave when this is over. I want you to stay. Not as hired help, not as a guest, but as someone who belongs here. Elena's throat tightened. Jacob, you don't have to answer now. I know this is complicated. Know you've got your own life to figure out. But I needed you to know that when this settles, when the trials are done and the dust clears, there's a place for you here, if you want it. She wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to throw herself into the promise of belonging and family and home. But 6 years of caution held her back, reminded her that wanting something didn't make it safe, that hope was dangerous when the world had taught you to expect disappointment. Let's get through tomorrow first, she said finally. Let's see this through to the end, then we'll talk about what comes after. He nodded, accepting her terms, but he didn't let go of her hand. They sat together in the darkness, and Elena let herself imagine, just for a moment, what it might feel like to stop running forever. Morning came too soon and too slow, time stretching and compressing in strange ways as they waited for Morrison and the marshals. Lucy sensed the tension, staying close to Elena, unusually quiet. Sarah moved through her routine with mechanical precision, but Elena noticed the way she kept glancing out windows, the way her hands trembled slightly when she poured coffee. The riders appeared just before noon. Morrison and Marshal Webb, accompanied by 6 federal marshals, all armed and grim-faced. They dismounted in the yard, and Morrison approached the porch with the bearing of a man about to change the world. "It's time," he said simply. "The warrants are issued. We're executing arrests within the hour. I need you all to stay here until we've secured the suspects. After that, Miss Cross, I'll need you to come to town and make your formal statement." "What about Jacob?" Elena asked. "He has testimony, too, about Margaret's death." "Mr. Hale will be called as a witness, yes. But the primary evidence comes from the documents Mrs. Hale collected and Miss Cross delivered." Morrison's eyes were hard. "We're charging Coleman and Porter with conspiracy, fraud, extortion, and murder. Judge Webb faces additional charges of corruption and abuse of office. If convicted, they're looking at life sentences, possibly hanging for the murder charge." Jacob's hand found Elena's, squeezed tight. This was it. The moment they'd been working toward, the justice Margaret had died trying to secure. "There's one more thing," Morrison said, his voice gentler now. "Miss Cross, I've been reviewing your case from 6 years ago. The family that accused you of theft. The son was represented by Attorney Coleman. The judge who presided over your trial was Webb. And the sheriff who arrested you was Porter's predecessor, a man who coincidentally died 3 months after your conviction, leaving Porter to take his position." The implications crashed over Elena like a wave. "They framed me? My conviction was part of their operation?" "I believe so, yes. We'll need to investigate further, but the pattern is clear. You refused the son's advances, so they destroyed you to protect him and to test their system. If they could successfully frame and convict an innocent woman, they could do it to anyone who threatened their land scheme." Morrison's expression was sympathetic. "I'm sorry, Miss Cross, but this means we can petition for your conviction to be overturned. You can get your name back, your freedom back, everything they took from you." Elena's knees went weak. Jacob's arm went around her waist, holding her up. "Everything?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Including your father's land. If it was sold illegally while you were imprisoned, we can reverse the sale. It's still yours, Miss Cross. It was always yours." The marshals rode out, leaving Elena standing in the yard with the weight of revelation crushing down on her. 6 years. 6 years of running, of shame, of believing herself marked and ruined and beyond redemption. And it had all been a lie. A test case for men who turned corruption into profit and justice into a weapon. She didn't realize she was crying until Lucy's small hand slipped into hers. "Why are you sad?" the girl asked. "They're going to catch the bad men. That's good, isn't it?" "It is good, sweetheart. These are happy tears." Elena pulled Lucy close. "Sometimes people cry when something broken gets fixed." They waited together, the 4 of them, time crawling by with agonizing slowness. Sarah made lunch that no one ate. Jacob paced like he had the night Elena left for Cheyenne. Lucy sat pressed against Elena's side, sensing that something momentous was happening, but not quite understanding what. Finally, in mid-afternoon, a rider came with news. The arrests had been executed without incident. Porter, Coleman, and Webb were in custody, being transported to Cheyenne to await trial. Morrison wanted Elena to come to town to make her statement and to meet with families who'd lost land, to begin the process of documenting the full scope of the conspiracy. Jacob drove them in the wagon, Elena beside him, Lucy and Sarah in the back. The ride to Ridgefield felt surreal, the familiar landscape transformed by the knowledge that justice was finally, actually being served. The town was in chaos. People clustered in groups, voices raised in shock and speculation. The diner owner who'd thrown Elena into the street stood on the boardwalk, talking rapidly to a group of women. She saw Elena and went silent, something like shame crossing her face. Elena held her head high and walked past without acknowledgement. Morrison had set up in the town hall, and the families were already gathering. Elena saw them as she entered, weathered men and women, farmers and ranchers, people who'd lost everything and had nowhere to turn. They looked at her with cautious hope, as if afraid to believe their suffering might finally be acknowledged. Morrison introduced her simply. "This is Elena Cross. She's the woman who brought us the evidence that's going to bring your tormentors to justice. Without her courage, none of this would be possible." An older man stepped forward, hat clutched in work-roughened hands. "They took my family's homestead. 3 generations we worked that land, and they stole it with forged papers and a judge who wouldn't hear our appeals. My wife died believing we'd failed, believing we'd lost everything through our own fault. Tears tracked down his weathered face. You're telling me it wasn't our fault? That we didn't fail? You didn't fail, Elena said firmly. They were criminals who used the law as a weapon. None of what happened was your fault. One by one, the families came forward, each with a story of loss, of land stolen and lives destroyed, of justice denied. Elena listened to them all, and Morrison documented everything, building a case so comprehensive that no jury could deny it. The process took hours. By the time they finished, the sun was setting and Elena's voice was raw. But she'd helped give these people something they'd thought was gone forever. Validation, acknowledgement, the hope of restitution. Morrison walked her out to where Jacob waited with the wagon. The trial will start in 6 weeks. I'll need you to testify, to walk the jury through how you discovered the evidence and what happened when Porter's men tried to stop you. Are you prepared for that? Yes. Good. And Miss Cross? Morrison extended his hand. What you did took extraordinary courage. The territory owes you a debt we can never fully repay. Elena shook his hand, then climbed into the wagon beside Jacob. Lucy was asleep in the back, curled against Sarah, exhausted by the day's emotions. They rode home in comfortable silence, the stars emerging overhead, the night settling around them like a blessing. At the ranch, Jacob carried Lucy inside while Sarah and Elena moved through the familiar evening routine. But everything felt different now, transformed by the knowledge that the fight was won, that justice was finally being served. After Lucy was tucked in and Sarah had retired, Elena found Jacob on the porch, their place for conversations that mattered. It's really over, she said, sitting beside him. They're going to prison. Margaret's death will be ruled a murder. The families will get their land back. Everything she fought for is actually happening. Because of you, Jacob said. You risked your life to finish what she started. We all risked something. You trusted me with the truth. Lucy trusted me to come back. Sarah trusted me to do the right thing. We did this together. Jacob turned to face her fully, his expression serious. Elena, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. She nodded, bracing herself. Now that your name's being cleared, now that you're getting your father's land back, are you leaving? Are you going back to Colorado to reclaim what was taken from you? The question she'd been avoiding since Morrison's revelation. Elena had spent 6 years defined by what she'd lost, believing her father's farm was forever beyond her reach. Now it was hers again, waiting for her in Colorado, a tangible link to the life she'd had before everything fell apart. But when she tried to imagine leaving the Hale Ranch, leaving Jacob and Lucy and Sarah, leaving this place that had welcomed her when the world had turned her away, her heart rebelled against the thought. That land was my father's dream, she said slowly. He worked it, loved it, died believing it was lost. Getting it back, that matters. But I'm not the same person who lived there 6 years ago. That girl died in a courtroom in Denver, and I'm someone different now, someone who's learned that home isn't about land or buildings. It's about the people who make you believe you deserve to stay. So what are you saying? Elena took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully because they would shape everything that came after. I'm saying I could sell that land, use the money to invest in this ranch, to expand it, to secure Lucy's future. I'm saying I could build a life here, if that's what you want, if there's really room for me in this family. Jacob's hand found hers in the darkness. There's been room for you since the day Lucy brought you home. I just didn't know how to tell you that the woman who showed up broken and running had somehow become essential to everything that matters. Jacob, I love you, Elena. I think I started loving you the moment you chose to stay for supper instead of running like every instinct told you to. And I know this is complicated, know we've both got scars that won't heal overnight, but I need you to know, if you choose to stay, it won't be as hired help or as Lucy's caretaker. It'll be as my partner, as my wife, if you'll have me. As Lucy's mother, if you're willing to take on a 7-year-old girl who already loves you fiercely. Elena's eyes filled with tears for the second time that day. You're asking me to marry you? I'm asking you to stop running. I'm asking you to build a life here, with us, with the family you've already become part of. I'm asking you to take a chance on something good after 6 years of surviving the worst the world could throw at you. His voice was raw with emotion. I'm asking you to stay, Elena. Please stay. She could have listed all the reasons to say no, could have cataloged her fears, her doubts, her conviction that she didn't deserve this kind of happiness. But looking at Jacob, this man who'd lost everything and still chose hope, who'd honored his dead wife by fighting for truth, who'd given shelter to a stranger because his daughter asked him to, Elena found she didn't want to say no. She wanted to say yes, wanted it with a ferocity that surprised her. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll stay. Yes, I'll marry you. Yes to all of it. Jacob pulled her into his arms and kissed her, gentle and searching, and Elena kissed him back with 6 years of loneliness and longing pouring through her. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, she rested her forehead against his. Lucy's going to lose her mind when she finds out, Elena said. Jacob laughed, the sound bright and free. She'll probably say she knew all along. She's got Margaret's intuition. She knew you were meant to be here before either of us figured it out. They sat together until the stars began to fade, planning a future that weeks ago would have seemed impossible. They'd marry after the trial, once everything was settled. They'd combine Elena's inheritance from her father's land with the ranch, expand the operation, maybe hire help so Jacob wouldn't work himself into exhaustion. They'd give Lucy siblings if they were blessed, would honor Margaret's memory by living the kind of life she'd died trying to protect. The trial, when it came, was everything Morrison had promised. Elena testified for 2 days, walking the jury through Margaret's journal, explaining how she'd found the evidence, describing her flight from Porter's men. Defense attorneys tried to discredit her, brought up her conviction, suggested she was a liar and a thief trying to fabricate evidence for personal gain. Morrison destroyed those arguments methodically. He presented the documentation showing Elena's conviction was part of Coleman's pattern of corruption. He brought in handwriting experts who confirmed Margaret's journal was authentic. He paraded family after family who'd been victimized by the land scheme, building a case so comprehensive that the defense had nowhere to hide. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They returned guilty verdicts on all counts. Judge Webb got life in prison. Coleman got 25 years. Porter got life for murder, with possibility of hanging pending appeal. Elena sat in the courtroom and watched them led away in chains, and she felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a quiet sense that the universe had been set right, that justice delayed was still justice served. After the trial, after the reporters had finished asking questions and the lawyers had filed their final paperwork, Elena and Jacob returned to Ridgefield. The town that had rejected her months ago now looked at her with something like respect, or at least acknowledgement that they'd misjudged her. The diner owner stopped Elena on the street one morning. "I was wrong about you," she said quietly. "And I'm sorry. What you did, bringing those men to justice, that took real courage." Elena accepted the apology with grace, though she didn't forget how quickly the woman had thrown her out when she'd needed help. Some wounds healed, some just scarred over. The wedding was small and perfect. Sarah organized everything with efficient precision. Lucy wore a new dress and scattered wildflowers with solemn concentration. Morrison came, representing the territory's gratitude. The families Elena had helped testified about their restored land, their returned dignity, their debt to the woman who'd risked everything for strangers. Jacob and Elena exchanged vows on the porch, where they'd spent so many evenings talking, where they'd learned to trust each other, where they'd built something worth believing in. Lucy stood between them, holding both their hands, binding them together as a family in fact, as well as heart. That night, after the celebration had ended and the guests had departed, Elena stood in the bedroom she now shared with Jacob and looked at her reflection. She was still thin, still marked by 6 years of hardship, but something fundamental had changed. The woman looking back at her wasn't broken anymore, wasn't just surviving. She was home. Lucy knocked on the door, already in her nightgown, her hair freshly braided. "Can I come in?" "Of course, sweetheart." The girl climbed onto the bed, sitting cross-legged, her expression serious. "Elena, can I call you Mama now? Or is that wrong because I already had a mama?" Elena's throat closed with emotion. She sat beside Lucy, choosing her words with care. "You did have a mama. A brave, wonderful woman who loved you so much she gave her life trying to protect you and your father and everyone in this territory. Nothing will ever change that. and you should never forget her. But, but I think your mama would want you to have someone to love you the way she did, to braid your hair and teach you things and be there when you need a mother's comfort. And if you want to call me mama, I would be honored, because I love you, Lucy. I loved you from the moment you took my hand and asked me to meet your daddy. Lucy threw her arms around Elena's neck, holding tight. I love you too, Mama. I'm glad you stayed. So am I, sweetheart. So am I. Over the following months, life settled into new rhythms. Elena sold her father's land in Colorado and invested the money in expanding the ranch. They hired 2 ranch hands, built a new barn, bought cattle to diversify beyond horses. The operation grew, prospered, became known throughout the territory for quality stock and fair dealing. Lucy thrived, growing taller and bolder, secure in the love of 2 parents who doted on her. She learned to ride like she'd been born in the saddle, helped with chores without complaint, and never stopped asking questions about everything. Sarah stayed on, claiming someone needed to keep them all in line, but Elena saw the contentment in her weathered face, the satisfaction of seeing the family she'd helped hold together finally heal. And Jacob transformed before Elena's eyes. The grief and guilt that had weighed him down began to ease. He laughed more, smiled more, held Elena close at night, and whispered that she'd saved him in ways she'd never fully understand. On the anniversary of Margaret's death, they visited her grave together, Jacob, Elena, Lucy, and Sarah. They brought flowers from the garden Margaret had planted, and Lucy placed them carefully on the headstone while Jacob stood with his hand on his daughter's shoulder. Thank you, Jacob said quietly to the woman he'd loved and lost, for fighting, for being brave, for leaving us the truth even when it cost you everything. You saved more than just our land, Margaret. You saved all of us. Elena added her own silent thanks. Thank you for being brave enough to document the truth. Thank you for raising a daughter who sees goodness in strangers. Thank you for loving a man who knows how to honor your memory by building a future you'd be proud of. They stood together in the Wyoming sunshine, a family forged from loss and courage, and the radical choice to keep believing in goodness even when the world tried to convince them otherwise. As they walked back to the wagon, Lucy between them holding both their hands, Elena thought about the woman she'd been 6 years ago, young, frightened, convicted of crimes she didn't commit, watching her future burn to ash in a courtroom in Denver. That woman had learned to survive by running, had spent years believing safety meant staying invisible, staying alone, staying one step ahead of a world that wanted to crush her. But the woman Elena had become knew something different. She knew that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was stop running, was let yourself be found by a barefoot girl with too much trust, was choose to stay even when leaving felt safer, was fight for justice even when every experience taught you the fight was rigged. She was Elena Hale now, wife, mother, rancher, the woman who'd brought down a corrupt conspiracy and reclaimed her name.